Hey, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Lead Your Movement. I'm Angelique Rewers, CEO and founder of The Corporate Agent, where we help experts and small business owners to win corporate clients. And this is our weekly show where we talk to entrepreneurs and business leaders who are using their platforms in order to make a big dent in the world. And today we're going to have a conversation about something that is very timely and important, and that is around employee health. Physical health, mental health, emotional health, and well being. Something that now that we're heading in on almost the ninth month of the pandemic is increasingly important by the day. There's no doubt that the last 8, 9 months have taken a tremendous toll on employees. We're seeing a huge exodus of women from the workplace who are dealing with all sorts of family challenges. They're bearing a disproportionate load of schooling kids at home instead of in the classroom, caring for loved ones, and all of the other challenges that we're seeing, the economic challenges, the disconnection that's out there. And in many organizations, what we continue to hear from top leaders is that the workload has actually exploded inside of companies. So without having that sort of normal end to the workday, that regrouping time, that sort of decompressing time during the afternoon commute, and really being able to disconnect for a bit from work, it's all bleeding together. So it's really becoming a pandemic within a pandemic when we think about the state of employee health and well-being. So for today's episode, we are talking to someone who is absolutely on the cutting edge of what is happening inside of organizations, both in the private sector, being, for-profit corporations and mid-market companies, as well as on the government side. And so this is a boutique business that is a woman-owned business that is working on the forefront. Someone who has seen demand skyrocket for their firm services since the pandemic hit, because they are an undisputed expert when it comes to employee well-being and using that in order to change company cultures. Our guest today is an award-winning CEO and management consultant, Fran Dean Bishop, who has established a 20-year track record as a business leader, a publisher, a speaker, and a technology innovator. Fran founded Aerobodies Inc. in 1997 as a provider of health management and business consulting services to both private and public sector organizations. As a response to market and customer requirements, under her leadership, Aerobodies has developed several proprietary health technologies and program innovations. She currently serves on multiple nonprofit boards and is an avid reader, cyclist, and traveler. Welcome to the show, everyone. Fran Dean Bishop. Fran, it is so good to have you on this show.
That was a mouthful. It's so great to be here, Angelique. Thank you so much for the invitation.
You have been doing this for a long time, Fran. This is not something that you just start doing. I know it ages all of us when we say it, but you've been doing this for 20 years, and your movement has continued to evolve over those 20 years, going deeper into the transformation of these organizations. How do you characterize the movement that you are leading now?
It's a great question to lead with, Angelique. And I would say, Aerobodies, we build resiliency and promote inclusivity for today's American worker. And particularly when you think about everything that's going on and what the worker is facing today, remotely, virtually, planning workplaces, we're really at the forefront of building that inclusivity in terms of the workplace, the structure of the workplace, and how that really is going to look different going into 2021 and beyond.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say that the script is unwritten for what it's going to look like. I mean, this is all new territory.
Yeah, it is. But I will say, it's interesting. I've been attending quite a few conferences, as you can imagine, on workplace well-being this year. And it's interesting when you take a look at the swing of things and how companies who were already ready and were already presenting themselves in the new economy, so to speak, to do things differently, have changed very quickly and have amended, modified, and kept moving. And those, as you mentioned in the opening, of our clients that are like the government agencies that take much longer to turn, I've been very delighted to see that they too have also been able to be a little bit more nimble and be willing to change their trajectory in terms of how they're looking at things. So the conversation is already starting now into
That's
2021.
exciting to hear. That's really exciting to hear. It's reassuring to hear, right? Because so often we see government not out in front, we see them behind. I know people are going to have a lot of questions for you today in our audience, so we're definitely going to get to those so that everyone really has context for this conversation. I'd love it if you would take a moment just to talk about some of the things that Aerobodies Inc. does, because a lot of times in the small business owner marketplace, Fran, when you hear people talking about health and wellness, you hear them doing workshops or trainings and a lot of services, which is great and very important. The work
Mhm.
that Aerobodies is doing is very robust in this space. You've actually tackled some things that a lot of small businesses don't tackle. Can you share a little bit about those service offerings that your company is providing and has been providing now for 2 decades?
Sure. So, being a small business, we have learned to be nimble. So, yes, we started out as a pure wellness and fitness play. And as we moved into the corporate environment, and particularly in the government environment, we realized that our services and the way we approach them, there was a need for us to be nimble and be modified in terms of what we do. So, in particular, in the last couple of years, we've been very responsive to working on the front lines and working with frontline working and supporting frontline responders, whether that's actually having people responding in the field, working in laboratories, particularly with partnering like with CDC or HHS and the like organizations like that, or also providing that nursing supportive or staffing care. So Aerobodies is not just a pure fitness play, and what we find is that that really helps us understand holistically what's happening with the employees today. So if you're looking at an organization that has a footprint of a bricks and mortar and they actually have facilities in the organization, that's one thing. But a lot of organizations don't. A lot of organizations have distributed employees. We call it a distributed workforce today. So they may be globally or they may be in different parts of the country. So how do you serve and support those employees in doing things that provide a more virtual experience, but at the same time, it's the same experience as the headquarter employees do. So we started doing this, I would say 7 to 8 years ago. And, obviously once COVID hit, we were already experienced in this way. So when we started getting orders to do things a little bit differently or a little bit more non-traditionally, and I'm not talking about the PPE stuff. We're not really in that PPE for anything at all. We really do work with the employee who's servicing the public. So on the front lines, we were ready and able to do that because we've already been in that space for quite some time.
Yeah, and just to for the benefit of our audience, I'm going to just add a couple of things if I can, and you correct me if I mischaracterize any of this. But there are organizations now. Obviously, the pandemic, and we're going to talk about this in a second, has shifted some of this temporarily. But your firm has literally taken over the outsourcing of managing fitness centers for employees. You have staffed trainers, like physical trainers. You have staffed nurses. You've set up on campus sort of health centers, kind of like, you had the camp, like the campus, if someone's sick at work, they have a place to go. You guys have also completely done a turnkey solution for workplace gyms, like an on-site office equipment gym. You guys have replaced physical equipment in those centers. You have sourced those things. You've literally helped set up physical spaces. And I think a lot of people think that that would be, the types of services, Fran, that a small business wouldn't necessarily have the capabilities to do, but you created that. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I think that's going to blow some people's minds that you're putting, nurses and therapists and fitness trainers on site at workplaces.
That's a great question. So it reminds me of something. I was in a conference last week and and the question comes up a lot. How did you get started? When did you get started? And it's funny, we've done so much in 20 years. Sometimes my team has to remind me, well, friend, we've done that. We did that, a couple of years ago. What if we just tweak it and make it look like this? So you're absolutely right. I think as a small business, sometimes companies think automatically that you don't have the know-how, you don't have the sophistication, you don't have the bandwidth, you may not have the intellectual property to be able to move that forward. we were setting up virtual fitness platforms in 2004. They're all the wave now. They're exciting now, but we did that for financial organizations back in early 2004. We were running fitness facilities in 1998. So what happened is that the pendulum in terms of popularity and budgeting, because once it becomes a groundswell of people understanding, obviously the offering, then the money has to follow it, right? So once you follow the money, then everybody follows the money. But we were already there being very innovative as a small company back then. There was a time where we stood up 17 individual fitness work sites simultaneously across the country, Puerto Rico and in British Columbia and in England at the same time. And as a small company, we just did it. So, you know, now to see so many players in the field, which is great. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity, but it's no surprise to us because it's where I think employers are recognizing that they have to be to really service their employees. And I think the thing I'm most proud of at this date is that when you see what companies are finally waking up to, there was an interesting quote I wanted to share from Wall Street Journal that Sheryl Sandberg recently shared. She said, some companies may think that worrying about employee burnout is a luxury they can't afford right now. In fact, it's mission critical. If companies rise to the moment, they can head off the disaster of losing millions of people, in quotation marks, women, and setting gender diversity back years. That was from the Wall Street Journal, and that was from a article and report about women in the workplace 2020. But it's very indicative of where the mindset of employers are today. You don't have the luxury of now thinking, well, is well-being something we should do? They're recognizing that you have to have a resilient workforce. You have to maintain these people. So going back to my point, I'm really proud of the fact that not only have we been able to stand up and staff frontline workers, but we're also supporting them in the background, secondarily, by many of the scorecards, assessments, strategies, programming that we put in place to make sure they can stay in their job and do an effective job, while at the same time, we're doing some really cool strategy and engagement work for some very well-known brands that we can't mention due to NDA, because they have leaders in the field that are responsible for, I have one leader that's responsible for 1,000 micromanagers throughout the world. And so it's really important for the bottom line of that organization to make sure he is well cared for. And that's our responsibility in terms of the resiliency. So I'm really proud of that work. And that work has come from us investing the time and energy to know how to do it and do it well.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And Liliana, I can't agree more with you. She just said, wow, I can't even imagine the logistics of setting up 17 spaces across the country in 1 month. That's why I wanted you to share that, Fran, because I think that so often small business owners especially sometimes put sort of an upper limit on what's possible for their organization.
Mhm.
And Aero Bodies is out there really competing with much bigger companies and really winning because the systems you've put in place, the proprietary methodologies you've put in place, the track record of results that you've put in place in really tough environments. Government can be a tough environment, corporate can be a tough environment, and
Yeah.
you all have tracked your success and you've seen that. You just talked about Sheryl Sandberg's quote. I'm so glad you shared that. Burnout isn't a luxury. Dealing with employee burnout is not a luxury right now that companies can afford to put off. And I think we've all seen the fatigue. It's not just normal work burnout. I mean, we've got fatigue on top of fatigue. And here in the US, I would add political fatigue. There's political fatigue. There's the pandemic fatigue. There's the work fatigue. I mean, it's tough. So what should companies be focused on doing right now? When you look at, when you're talking to CEOs out there and you're talking to agency heads out there,
Mhm.
what are you telling them that they most need to be focused on right now?
Well, I've got a slide I'd love to share with your
Yeah, please.
constituency real quick. Let me just share this for everyone to see, because I think this is a really powerful point, and I don't want to just say it. I want people to see it.
Oh, that
Um,
sounds great. And Kathy Norris, just while you're pulling that up, I'll share Kathy Norris's comment here. She said, "Love the concept of making sure your top leaders who manage thousands of employees are physically and mentally well cared for themselves." I agree, Kathy. I mean, that's just it's the burden on the managers right now and the leaders. They're really feeling it. They're trying to be there for their people. Oh, this is great, Fran.
Yeah. So to your point, again, we do quite a bit of these kinds of conferences or conversations. A lot of time we're asked, how do we strategize? How do we even think about what our employees are going to be needing for next year? I just got a call from a company just yesterday, a financial company that asked us to put together a proposal for them for, they've got 1,000 employees nationwide. They want to put together some sort of programming for them. And the first thing I say, taking a question out of your book is, what's the impact you're trying to drive? And so we put this competency list together a couple of months ago when we think about the employee in 2021 and what they're going to really need. Part of this, for those of you who are in the coaching space and understand emotional intelligence and EQ, can see it. Part of this comes from the EQ digest, but I've added 1 and 2, resiliency and well-being. And I've also given kind of some tags so you kind of see where we're going with this, because it's not enough now for an employee to have a coach. It's not enough now for an employee to have a gym membership. It's not enough anymore for an employee to be able to get either behavioral health or biometric screenings. They need it all. They need it all. And I'm finding that top employers, and they don't have to be the largest employers, right? But they have to be employers that really get it, that really understand the inclusivity. And when I'm using inclusivity as a tag word, I'm using it from the standpoint of what we're seeing now in the well-being space, addressing the whole employee. Don't ask your employees to come to work with only a piece of themselves. Don't ask your employees to come to work and not have to think about all the issues they're dealing at home, right? And that's the whole piece of them being able to collaborate and coordinate. Don't ask your employees not to come to work and not act like they're a leader because they're in a position they don't want to be. Don't ask your employees to come to work and not be able to deal with conflict management. All of these pieces are important. So I'll share this at the end of the conversation, but one of the things we're starting to see is, as companies ask us, hey, what's the strategy? What's the solution? What's the resource that we should be thinking about next year? Really make it a blended approach. And so we're actually working with the organization right now. They already have executive coaches for all of their leaders. We're bringing in the resilience and the mindfulness and the well-being piece, and also bring in the EI piece so that they can serve those leaders even more effectively. So I think as you look into next year and what's going to be important, all of these pieces are important, and all of them are important for companies to holistically approach their employees.
I love this. I am really personally tickled to see communication on there. It's amazing how many people overlook that, and yet that is the source of so much stress in organizations. That's very unique to have that.